Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Our today's webinar is about mutation in ransomware and how complex it's becoming and how complex the new types of ransomware has become. My name is Torben Clemmensen. I'm a pre-sales engineer at VIPRE, and with more than 25 years of experience in IT in general, with main focus on IT infrastructure like hardware servers, networking, and in the latest years, it's been IT security with focus on GDPR. I come with a vast background on how to look at this. So I hope my knowledge and the knowledge I will bring onto you will give you something. So I always learned that it's always good to start a webinar with an agenda. So I created an agenda. First off, as a disclaimer, some of the numbers in here might not be what you hear on every day. It might be higher, it might be lower, and that's of course because there is a lot of numbers fluctuating all the way around the internet, depending on where it's from. So in order to give a number, I decided to use a multiple amount of reports and so on to create an average. So my number is an average. So the numbers you might see are an average, not a direct number because that's too hard to get a direct picture of. Other numbers and other information will come from Gartner and from Europol. So first off, in order to talk about the mutation in ransomware in general, in order to talk about how it happened, we need to create a threat landscape. What is out there? Where it's coming from? Who's the obvious victims? And then we'll go down and we'll talk about the new ransomware, and of course going into RAS and MAS, so ransomware as a service and malware as a service. And I will end up the session with the question session. So let's start off. So the threat landscape. Now, in order to understand all about ransomware and in generally understand about the threat landscape, you need to have a picture. You need to understand what is it that we see, which countries is hacking us, what do the countries want, or is it state and privately funded? Now, there is, of course, always a certain amount of things that will influence the outcome of this. So if we look at it in general, we hear, especially here in Europe, that it's almost like it's Mr. Putin hacking us. And it's primarily Russian that's hacking us. That's what we hear. It's the name of the game. But it's totally true. The numbers I will show in a minute might give you a different picture on that, because it varies a lot on what does the country want. The country where the hack comes from, what do they want? And is it state funded, or is it private people just sitting there having a group there? So by sharing the first numbers, this might come as a shock to some may not. Russia is actually not the biggest hacker at all. It is actually by far China. And the actual number is 41.6%. On a very strong high place, you actually have USA coming in on the second, you have Turkey, then we have Russia. Now, it's kind of like funny when we sit here in Europe and we hear all these ransomwares coming out and it's Russia that's hacking us, that they only stand for 5%. That's a very small piece of the pie in considering to what we hear in the media. And that kind of gives a twisted picture of it, but not really anyway. So in order to understand it, we gotta look at some different reasons or why the different countries are hacking and what they're going for. So who are the obvious victims? Of course, it's the country that actually decides what it is and what is hacked for. So if we look at the countries and we go like, okay, we have China as the most hacking country in the world. There's a reason for that. Their primary goal is getting state secrets. That's what they want. And if we then look at the numbers as we see here, that China would like very much to get information from USA. They see them as a natural threat. So they attack the US. And that's why we have, official numbers, but probably not more if you look at the unofficial. But throughout the last 14 years, 156, attacks that were successful with a large outcome from the United States. And then we go back and then we go like, okay, then why do we hear Mr. Putin and Russia is hacking Europe? That's because in Denmark, we're aiming, or in Denmark, in Europe, we're aiming at private companies. They're aiming at companies where they can actually implant the ransomware, get the money out. And that's where in Europe, That's why it's, private companies and it's private people that's getting hit. And actually to the amount where we see an attack every 39 seconds. It's not considered as a total successful attack, but it's an attack that actually penetrates something and may not cause damage at the end. So when we hear Russia, so much and ransomware, is the main reason is that when we look at Europe in general, there's a few things that we need to keep in mind. Is that European people will in the end pay out. Regardless if we're companies, regardless if we're private people, we are most likely to pay out and pay that ransom to get our ransomed hardware free again, or software, all the information to get it freed. Where that comes as, a big surprise and go like, why do we do that? Because we think it's easy. It doesn't always come out that we get the data out. So by determining the attack, and as mentioned, you can see that US, UK, and Russia are the countries where state data, most likely is hacked. And we take out US and UK, which are the top two numbers when we talk about countries getting hacked by Chinese, by the way. Then the US stands for, of course, the largest amount with 156. UK actually comes in on the second place with a 46. But Russia only have 11 over the last 14 years. That's not that much, but it's still a third place. So the countries that we see hacking is that the eastern countries like Russia, but in this case, China, hacking the West European countries, the power poles, where we have most information, and that's of course the US and UK. So as I said, Europe is for the money. That's where the money is, and we kind of like bite our own butt a little bit on this. If we look at the GDPR, which I'm a speaker for, I like the fact, it's kind of like also a problem. So you see, when we created the GDPR, we actually created a situation where we before had our data spread out over most of the world, but now we started like consolidating it, putting it into countries, even into a few data centers where it's approved under the GDPR. Now that's kind of like a hacker's dream. Instead of going out to a billion places, now they only need to go into each country and find 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 different data centers where all data is stored. Not only did we store a bunch of data, which we fragmentized before, we store a lot more information about people. As under the GDPR, we need to be able to state everything. That's why we also create more data. We created it more, and that's why it's becoming easier in a way, but also more lucrative to have a ransomware attack on a European country or European people in general. So by looking at numbers, you say, okay, 44% of all attacks in the EU comes through either phishing or social engineering. That's a high number, and this number is for the last quarter. This is also for the last quarter, and I underlined it because I'll get back to it later. 67% of all malwares, it's delivered via HTTPS connection, an encrypted connection from the web. It's becoming more and more broadened out. This number is a new number for me, but it is kind of like a funny number because we had 230,000 new strings of malware that is discovered every day. But it's since 2016. Now we're writing 2021, almost 2022, but the number is still static. It didn't change. It fluctuated up and down a little bit, like 1,000 up or 2,000 up and 2,000 down, but it is still a static number for almost 7 years. It takes an average of 6 months to discover an attack. Now that's actually something good, and I'll also get back to that and the top number in a moment. But about a year ago, it actually took us about 9 months to discover that we got hit by an attack. Now we're actually down to 6. Now there's multiple reasons for that, but I'll get back to that in a minute. 71% of all companies expect that an attack to spread internally inside the company. Now, spreading inside a company, is actually a bigger risk. And if we look at generally how companies are protecting themselves, it's usually a shell that's created around the companies. But throughout the corona, we found out that the shell, is pretty good looking at a company location. But when you have, employees working from home, you just created a multiple holes inside your shell that actually creates it to, become easier. And as we move into the cloud and as we start to use, data centers locally in each country, and as we start to use more and more Office 365 and other cloud softwares and solutions, this becomes easier if you do not think about it when you do your IT security. Another thing that's funny is that the numbers that we have in successful attacks, now these numbers is successful attacks within Europe. So in, really what it had really an effect. So that was 432 in 2019, 2020, almost double up. It was 753. Now that's, the number increases, like I explained before, for two reasons. The one reason is that, of course, we are detecting it more, but also the fact that we are starting to work from home. Now, when we start to work from home, we also create vulnerabilities in a natural, IT environment that we didn't see was there before because it wasn't an issue. So if we look at the numbers and go forth and back over them, we can actually see that with the 230,000 being static and the average going down from 9 months to 6 months, is the fact that we're getting better at discovering that we got hit, but we didn't get better at protecting ourselves. It's still static. We just got better at figuring out that we got hit by new strings or by a ransomware or malware or whatever. We just got, to the point where we start to see this in our infrastructure. And that's why we need to be even more aware of how we create and set up our IT security today, because it is not that simple anymore. We need to know, not just figure out that we got hit, we need to figure out how to stop it before it spreads internally. So with the new ransomware, of course, there is a growth in ransomware, no doubt about it. We've seen growth year over year constantly. So Gartner actually put out that there's a 62% growth in ransomware attacks in the US in 2020. They expect for year over year for the next, until 2025, that there will be an increase between 10 to 12% per year until 25. So that's actually a higher number that keeps, getting bigger and bigger. In average, or a little bit over average, there is 4,000 ransom attacks daily in the US. Now that's actually, looking at the amount, the size of the country, it could be a lot, it could be not a lot, but it's still, to me, a great number that could be less if we think about it. Now, taking into Europe and going back to what I said before, that, EU, the GDPR, now we are consolidating data, now we are putting it in each country, putting it in separate, in data center that's more, one-on-one. Now we have a situation where the growth is becoming higher. Now it's 71%. We see or expect, or Gartner expects, a growth with 15% per year until 25. So we will actually have a higher number and a higher growth rate than we would see in the US compared to the EU. So that means the EU will be increasingly becoming a place where ransomware will be distributed more than anywhere else. If we look in 2020 again and look, we can see that there's been a 150% increase in random demands. Now, we see that increase again back to the fact that we in Europe, in the EU, in generally are good at paying out. We will pay the money to get our data out. But it is also because we can be pushed to pay out the money, and because there's a lot more attacks, and because that, companies and people in general are getting more fearful of this because they know the damage they can cause. So they're much faster to pay out the ransom. There is, of course, different things about this. Do we supposed to pay out or are we not supposed to pay out? So take an average number, and this number I'll get back to a little bit later. An average claim for a business today is $200,000. That might be a lot, might be a little, depending on the size of the company. But for a private person, it's $10,000 in average. Now that's, kind of a high number, but it's there, and the numbers are there because it's paid out. In Q2 in Europe, EU, 83% of all attacks were ransomware. These are numbers that we got from the Europol. That means that, it's not numbers from any, other partner out there. It's Europol's numbers. Now that's a high number. The next number you'll see here is actually what the numbers that scared me the most, and it's also a Europol number. over 8,000 known ransomwares that was designed for mobile banking by mobile phone. Now that's, kind of like scary in itself, because, if you ransomware a phone on a mobile bank on a phone, you will think, okay, I'll just log on through my computer. But the problem with these types of ransomware is there's a hidden DDoS attack in it. So if you try to recover by a computer, it will slam down that connection again, or do multiple try wrongful logins to put it down. So kind of like you're stuck. You can't really undo it unless you get it free. So that means that when we look at our IT security, it is important by all means also to look at mobile and mobile phones, mobile devices in general. What are we using and how are we using it? And that's where the new types of ransomware and multi-strings or mixed ransomwares are coming in. Let me explain it to you in a little bit more detail. So first we got to look at ransomware. Sorry for the graphics. I'm not a graphic dude, so I'm just technical. This is boring in the way that it looks, but interesting in the way that it works. Now we look at hacker groups, you got to look at it like it's a business, it's a company. Me, you, look at me as a person. I travel in between IT security companies, and whenever I move to somebody, a new company, I take a little bit of my knowledge with me. Some of the things that I learned throughout the past, throughout the companies, I take with me. Pretty much works the same way with hackers. And we've seen it actually pretty good lately. We've seen that it was DarkSide and some of the other groups. And suddenly we see them disappear. Now they become something new. They become DarkSide Hacker Group. It's not a part of DarkSide, isolated DarkSide alone. It's a part of DarkSide. It could be a part of Anonymous or Morpho or Bureau or 121. These are just random for me names to put in, so just to give you a picture. Now these hackers from different groups, design a new group. That could be for multiple reasons. Like in a business, hackers see themselves as business people. They don't see themselves as hackers. They see themselves as pretty much like a technical sales guy. Now we want to, create money for ourselves. We want to create money for our business. We want something to live on. So where there is better money, there is, of course, the way you want to be. And if you're a good hacker and you sit in one group and a good hacker and another group start to, talk together, they figure out that, okay, we can create a business together. And by creating that business, we can earn more money. And that's how it works. So now we have new hacker groups coming in and appearing, and old hacker groups disappearing. So that also makes it very complicated to track what is going on and how it's, developing in that area, because we see them pop up and we see them disappear. And in the same way, we see ransomware pop up and we see them disappear, or we see, just like now, new ways of doing ransomware, new methods, new types of ransomware. So to look at what we know that is there, we know that there is Conti, we know there's Cha-Cha. Everybody heard about WannaCry, probably the most famous of all. So looking at the hacker group, some hacker may have developed or be part of developing every one of these. And they have a piece of the code or the whole code. So when they merge in the new group, as shown before, now all of a sudden they have the method to create new ransomwares. And these ransomwares are totally different than what we know. So if we look isolated at a ransomware like WannaCry, you'll be infected, your software will be locked down, and you have to pay out to get the key. Now this is the problem with the new one. It's totally different. It is multiple set of software, or multiple sets created to create one, or it's multiple layers of different ransomware. So now you're no longer getting hit by one ransomware. You could get hit by 4, 5, or 2, or 6, or 8 even. So they just lays in layers. So whenever you get a key, you will most likely only move out the outer layer, and then there will be a new layer that demands a new key. Or even worse, you will be in a situation where it's combined, where there's a little bit of each ransomware, and now all of a sudden it's unique. It's a unique piece of ransomware sitting on your machine or your environment, where the things that we've been working on before, creating keygens or how to solve the problem, now all of a sudden it's so worthless because it's unique for you. And that means that you either have to pay out or have some way of recovering your data. So the two new types that we've seen, and they just started to sprinkle out this summer vacation, they're rather new and not that broad yet, but it is something we're gonna see in the future because there are hell of a lot more effective than the old types of ransomware. So let me explain how it could be loaded. Now, this is an average Danish web page, computer world. Now you click onto it and it will be the real one. It will be coming in either via a phishing mail or you get redirected. But anyway, you end up on that web page. Now every web page contains a picture and some text. And now they're starting to hide the data inside each picture. That means each picture considers a little bit of code of different types of ransomware. So that could be, one picture have one, another. But when you go to the web page, inside your CPU is, kind of like loaded a loader that will receive all this and create and compile the ransomware in the end. But in order to do that, you need to click a little bit around. So now you start clicking. So you click the first, we want to read about IBM. So you get a little bit of Sudino. Now you click around and go to the next one, or you get a little bit of cha-cha or the full code. You want to click around again and you get a WannaCry from there. Now you go read that article and all of a sudden you got dark side ransomware going onto the computer. Now the computer, the compiler inside the CPU will have all this data and everything is in the CPU. Nothing moved out from the CPU, is still there. So it's pretty much undetectable. Now it compiles. It loads and the first thing it does is disable the endpoint. So it doesn't detect this. And then it loads and you will not feel at all. Nothing will come out. Now you have this unique piece of ransomware on your computer, either with, like I explained, multiple types of ransomware, or the even worse new one, that it is a little bit of every ransomware that's totally unique for your computer. So now you have a situation where you can't really go out and mediate at the same way, but you definitely need to find a way to do things. How to mediate, you're locked down. So you paying the ransom, as we explained before in Europe, you have to pay that ransom. There is no way around it, unless you put yourself in a situation where this could not happen, where you could protect yourself. So let's look even more. I might go a little bit over time. So ransomware, one of the things I discovered, I like walking around the dark web occasionally. So one of the things that's new with all of this is ransomware as a service. Now I went through this and I actually ordered it online for fun because I could. It took me 15 minutes with a VPN connection and a Tor browser to find this web page. So on the web page, you can get ransomware as a service. One of those ransomwares we saw before. A price on it is one company, employees between 250 and 500, fixed price, 15,000. Guaranteed, they will guarantee you this. A minimum of 10% of the hardware being locked down. They will guarantee you the 200,000 that I wrote earlier and then claim that they will guarantee that will be paid. And if you're a, let's say it honestly, really asshole, when you order this, you can actually decide if you want them to have to release the data when they get the key or just pretend they didn't hear it. All of this is done just on a website. You go to a website, you click through the menu, you pay by Bitcoins. And if you're, again, back to the asshole kind of a thing, now you can customize the ransomware with even a personal message or a personal ransomware that just hits that one. It could be a competition or somebody you don't like, but it will cost you more, but it will still be there. So looking at, the fact that you can actually guarantee to get money out of this, it's a good business. Now you would wonder, why doesn't the hacker just, take the 200,000 himself and kind of like, it's better than 15,000, because they want to create a business. They're looking at this with a business perspective. So in order to get, more money for their own development of their own ransomwares, they need money. In order to get that easier is, by just getting a 15,000 in for somebody who would like to order a ransomware. So it's actually pretty good business. Now, why not look at it even further and say, okay, there is actually another option on the same webpage. You can actually get a malware. You can do both at the same company if you're really bad at it, but this is it. Now you can get, one type of malware for the same company size, Of course, it's a little bit more expensive because there's no ransom in it, no money in the same way. It costs 20,000. They will guarantee, again, a 15% spread within inside the company. They will even provide you with a data extraction, depending on the data type and the quantity of it, but you can get data out of it. So if you want to get a competition, or you want to go to let's say, like I mentioned earlier, one of the GDPR data centers that's situated in each country, you can much easier get data out, and it will cost you a portion of money, but it will be at a, sounds kind of like marketing, but a lower price than trying to figure it out in other ways, and you will have information, and information is power. And again, if it's somebody you don't like, it's like a competition, or you want to just put the thumb up and say, hey, it was me. Of course, you can design a custom message or an effect, even if you want that. It costs you extra, but it's still doable. You do it online by a website, you pay online in Bitcoins, and it's a done deal. And when you're on it and you do the ordering as you do now, there is a service, employee that pops up. It could be a hacker or whatever, starting to talk to you when you go through this. Pop up in a chat and go like, okay, are you liking what you're seeing? Are you going through this? Is there something we can do? Of course, they're starting to pull you in to get some extra money because they want some extra effects on it. There is also, a little downside to this. If you do not think now that the guy that you're trying, to buy from here to do an attack, he might just turn on you and attack you instead, because you will actually do some information to him and something will go back and back. But in general, this is how it is. It's a pure business. So what do you need to mitigate against this? Yeah, well, first of all, in general, it is zero trust. Don't trust anything. Don't trust anything that runs on the computer, on the network. Everything that goes forth and back needs to be scanned. Everything needs to be sandboxed. That, regardless if it's an internal mail that runs through internally, scan the thing. That's where it's spread, like the 71% actually expect it to spread, and mail is actually one of the easiest places to spread. Another thing is, make sure that the endpoint at any given time is optimized to have the latest information, and optimized to understand what is the threat that's coming. Newer endpoints will, of course, understand that the ransomware is compiled on the computer, so they have some kind of protection on it, but it will still not protect you 100%. And the last thing, which I cannot emphasize enough, if you do security awareness training, you will teach employees, people, young people, whatever, to spot a phishing mail, which is primary attack vector. They will spot a spam, and they will spot a virus, and they will start to understand IT, on why IT put in multi-factor authentication, why they put in filtering, why they do all these things. All of a sudden, you will actually have the last line of defense be your best line of defense. You cannot have all the above. You cannot have the best network. You cannot have the best endpoint, because something will slip through. But if you do not train the person in the end, it will be without an effect. It will definitely not work for you. So do the SAT, do the security awareness training, get the full circuit, make sure that the hardware, the software, and in the end, the person are working together to effortlessly protect you against an attack. So I put in a slide for questions, but I would also like to say now that, kind of like, if you would like to do a webinar or even deeper dive into all this, please do contact one of our salespeople, or do write us if you want to hear more about specific things inside this presentation or other presentations in general. Do feel free to contact us. We would gladly do a presentation on that, or with a webinar. So please do not hesitate. So if you don't pop a question, if you don't have any questions, I would like to thank you for your participation today. And I hope all of you have gotten a little bit of an insight into what new ransomwares are and why they're coming. But like I said, if you would like to know more, do not hesitate, reach out to us, and we'll do a one-on-one where we can go more in depth on ransomware or malware as a service or ransomware as a service, whatever you would like to know about. And we'll give you an explanation on what it is and our pitch on how you can mitigate against it. I wish all of you a fantastic day.